I am Muslim. I'm not an Islamic scholar. I'm not an imam. I'm not a sheikh. I'm a layperson. You're jumping into the crux of it. So the question is, can you use AI? And my answer to it right now, as we speak here, is
Hi, and welcome to another episode of the Cloud Architects podcast. This time, a solo edition with me, Nicolas Blank, and my guest, Khalik. Tell us a little bit about you. Tell us who you are, what we're talking about, and why you even qualify to talk about it.
Hey, Nick. Thanks for having me on. So as you said, I'm Khalik Dolly. I've been in the industry probably for, I'm going to reveal my age, right? But I think the gray hairs kind of do that on its own.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I've been in the industry for 25 years plus, sort of working across customers and industries and multinationals. And so I've got the advantage that I've worked with technology all of my life. Obviously, I've worked with AI the last couple of years. And I've always thought about how do we use technology, and whether it's AI or anything else, cloud, it doesn't really matter. How do we use that to the benefit of society? Obviously, as a consultant, I've got a business lens to the world, but for me, it's never only been about business. It's always been about how do we use tech for social good. And I think you've heard that kind of been used multiple times before. And AI, I think, lends itself so nicely to being used for social good. And so I think that's what qualifies me here. I've got solid background in tech, solid background in business, and really passionate about social good, and put all of that together. And here we are.
I was scrolling through my LinkedIn feed and I saw you commenting on AI usage, but actually through an Islamic lens. And I thought, actually, I need to speak to you. I've known you for, I think at least 20 years. I've known you in various consulting roles that you've had. So huge amount of respect for your technical ability. But then through LinkedIn, which is a highly professional platform, I saw you commenting on the kind of discussions which would scratch my brain or create an itch in my brain in a very particular place. And I thought, you are probably the best person that I know to start having a discussion around how do we entertain the usage of AI, but through not only an Islamic lens, because you are a practicing Muslim, but also through a lens of professionalism and through communities. I'd like to start with that. One of the first comments that I ever saw and that intrigued me, and I had absolutely no idea what you were talking about, and you and I had a discussion and you were kind enough to explain it to me. The very first comment that ever intrigued me, and I had to research, was a discussion around, can AI ever be Mufti? And I thought, what on earth are you talking about?
Yeah, so you're jumping kind of into the crux of it. So now I feel we've got to backtrack slightly, sort of how we got to that point. And it's interesting, so I remember quite distinctly when OpenAI first launched ChatGPT. What was that? 2 years ago only? It feels like it's been forever because like the evolution and the iteration has just been like at a pace. And I remember it was around about December-ish of, help me out, Nick, what would that have been? 2022?
Gosh, I remember 2022 being the COVID years. So I think it would have been a little bit after
COVID was 2020, dude.
Yes, you're right. So, the world was
like
I'm going to go with 2022.
Yeah, like COVID messed with our timeline.
It did. At this time.
OpenAI comes along, messes with the timeline even further. Anyway, so I started playing with ChatGPT, and I thought to myself, just out of interest. So, like you said, I am Muslim. I try to practice as best as I can. I'm by no means a scholar. I'm not an Islamic scholar. I'm not an imam. I'm not a sheikh. I'm a layperson, right? Sure, many years of practice behind me, so I kind of do understand things. And I thought to myself, you know what? Let me try and see how ChatGPT can actually be used. And so this was at the beginning. ChatGPT wasn't where it is at right now. And I knew very little about prompting at the time. And I started to kind of prompt this thing and said, look, So, Friday is like the big prayer day. We all go to mosque on Friday. And I told ChatGPT, help me to design
Mm.
a lecture that can be used on a Friday. And I gave it a topic and I said I wanted to be a lecture about love. And it's interesting that I chose that topic, right? I've always had this view that sometimes, you go to mosque or to church and sometimes the lectures are very, what's the word for it? They can
Dry?
be quite harsh, quite strict, like thou
Okay.
shalt not, right?
Yes.
And I thought, let me change this up, let me kind of approach it from a position of love. So develop. And I'm going from memory now. And it actually built this sermon for me. And I kind of understand the structure of how a sermon typically looks. And it hit the spot, and it
Mm.
actually gave it to me like word for word. If I wanted to stand at a pulpit and deliver this, I would pass as someone kind of as an imam, as a sheikh. But then I told it, so from an Islamic point of view, there's kind of two sets of texts. There's the Quran, that is like the absolute book of guidance. And then there's the traditions that's taught by the Prophet, and that kind of supplements what's in the Quran. So I said, hold on, I need you to put in a couple of verses from the Quran to support what you're saying. Sure enough, it did that. And it did it in English. And I said, no, I want it in Arabic.
Mm.
And it actually provided Arabic text to me. And I said, okay, I want it to be transcribed. So the text written as English, but Arabic language, right? But
Mm.
using the English, I wanted to say font, not font, but you know what I mean, right?
The
And I said,
character set.
the character said, and I want the meaning for it. And it did that.
Mm.
And I also said, support it with some of the prophetic sayings. And sure enough, this is what it built. And it developed this whole thing. And at that point, it actually got a lot of interest. I think I posted it to LinkedIn, to some social media, shared it with the local imam at our local mosque. And he looked at this and he was like, wow, I can't believe this. But I also said, at that point, I started to realize a few things. One is this is cool, but this is also dangerous, right? Because now anybody, any layperson could kind of do this, try and come across as an expert. And I think from a religious point of view, there's a lot of hidden danger in that. Also at the time, what we were starting to discover is how AI hallucinates that,
Mm.
clever word. And what if it hallucinated about sacred text? What if it made up sacred text? So that's a bit of a worry.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so that kind of happened then. I got invited to some radio programs to kind of talk about it, and a lot of interest in that. Fast forward we kept on working at it. Fast forward a couple of years, and a couple of months ago, one of our local scholars, visionary guy, he approached myself and a few other colleagues, and he had this notion, and he actually said, look, I've been dabbling with AI, but I don't think that my colleagues are using it in an effective manner. Well, they're either not using it or they're not understanding what this could really do for us. Okay.
Right.
And he then said, so visionary guy, he said, I want you guys, you are technologists,
Mm-hmm.
but I want you guys to put on a seminar, a program. I'll invite my colleagues. So bunch of
Mm-hmm.
scholars, imams, sheikh. I'll also invite educators to the seminar. And I want you to tell them about AI. I want you to tell them what AI is,
Mm-hmm.
what AI isn't. And I want them to be able to leave that session armed with knowledge, practical tips about how to use AI in their everyday life. So that's what sparked the sort of last bit of work, this visionary scholar. And we put together the seminar, and I think probably attended by about 500 people or so, across scholars and teachers, sort of both Western academic teachers as well as Islamic study sort of teachers.
Mm-hmm.
And we developed a theme for this conference, right? Basically to say that AI is not a scholar,
Mm-hmm.
right? Meaning that like use AI in an appropriate manner, but do use it. AI is not a scholar. AI is a tool that you can make use of. We kept it simple. So we looked at ChatGPT using the sort of free capability. We also looked at Google's capability and Notebook LM. Actually, this is what this particular sheikh was making use of. And Notebook LM, I think the use cases on that from a teaching point of view is probably you know, a lot more powerful than what you can even do with ChatGPT if you understand how it works. So we
Mm.
put together the seminar, very well attended. And what we developed in that is, first of all, to dispel the myths of AI, sort of what AI can do, what AI can't do. And in fact, in that session, this question came up about, can you use AI as a Mufti? So maybe I should, for our viewers, define what a Mufti is, I suppose. Right? So
Yes,
a
please.
Mufti, yeah. I mean, I know you had to go and research it, right?
Yes, I
So
did.
yeah, so a mufti is this like very, very learned Islamic scholar, someone that you would go to pass a judgment. So you are unsure about something. It's something that's not clearly spelled out by the sacred text, like thou shalt not do this. It's a matter of interpretation. And so what the muftis would need to do is they've got a framework that they make use of. They understand the sacred texts. They understand the prophetic traditions, but they also understand local context. They understand application of those sacred texts, prophetic traditions within the local context. They also have empathy, right?
Which is
So
very
they
human.
very human, very human. So they don't simply take a black and white approach to it. So they've got to weigh up all of these things. Other thing that they do, and we may as well just, talk about this. So in Islam, like in many other religions, I suppose, there's different schools of thought, there's different sects, and often sects don't get along with each other. One doesn't recognize another one. And so the predominant school of thought of the local area that's asking this particular question, all of that comes into play. The mufti would know that I can use this particular piece of evidence to guide the decision because it makes sense. It is what's being used locally. So there's a lot of thought. And I mean, typically a mufti's experience would be a PhD level
Mm.
background person. So
Mm.
very highly learned. Right. So the question is, can you use AI to do what this mufti does? And my answer to it right now, as we speak here, is absolutely not. I mean, AI is not human. AI does not have empathy.
Mm.
It's not really going to. And it's interesting because I know that like ChatGPT is, for example, is trying to create this impression of empathy.
Them parents.
Yeah, but is it real? Probably not. Probably makes it even worse, right?
Mm.
So there's a lot that needs to be taken into account. And it kind of goes back to what our seminar was about, which is to say, use AI for what it's good at, allow it to do the research for you. Islamic text has got sort of reams and reams of books and knowledge. There's probably a lot of knowledge that's been written in Arabic as an example. It may not have been translated into English. Use AI to understand all of that, translate it into English for you, and then apply your mind to it. But apply your mind if you know how to apply your mind. So if you are a mufti, you can use all of that and you can come up with a verdict. You can make a
Mm.
judgment based on that. As Khalik, I, I don't think I've got the knowledge to do that. I'm certainly not going to know when this thing is fabricating stuff. It's like, these cases in South Africa and the US where lawyers were caught out
Mm. Mm.
making up case law and using case law when they went to the judge. The judge, when you can look for the case law, they couldn't find it, right?
And it
Because
didn't exist.
AI didn't exist. So imagine you do that same thing with sacred knowledge and sacred text.
I'd like to argue that in terms of the guardrails that we need around AI, and I think this is where you are ideally placed from an education point of view. And let me take a step back to establish some context. What I've heard you say is that when we deal with something as precious as what we believe, we need a human who has our context, local context, the cultural context, the context of the problem that we're trying to solve, as well as an empathetic base to filter a particularly or a potentially controversial question or answer through. So the kind of thing that we as humans would even call wisdom.
Yeah.
So we can't easily replace that human role. And we'll talk about the consulting lens that you and I have in a little while. But if we talk about the most vulnerable amongst us, which are the young folks who are seeking answers. We're finding that there's more and more social isolation. It's easier than ever before to pick up a device, to find a screen, to speak to something that appears to have that lens of empathy. And in its most tragic iteration, we are seeing documented cases of teenagers who are vulnerable, who are seeking, driven to suicide. We've had some rather tragic examples that were documented with teenagers dying with a device in the hand with the helpful, in this case, AI bot encouraging the context it had inferred, which appeared to be helpful, to go and encourage the teenager to go towards a tragic result.
Yeah.
Now, if we take the human context out of this and we established that lens of wisdom that we want to have a human to escalate a question to, what should I do under this circumstance? And when it comes to life, life is complicated enough. Talk about life and death, marriage, conflict. How do I deal with conflict, for example, in a manner that is appropriate to my culture without potentially tending towards a non-intended tragic result where the AI could encourage me, because it thinks it has context, to go down the completely wrong trail and actually cause harm.
Yeah. There's a lot in that, isn't it?
There's a lot in that. But this is what we wrestle with. And to frame this, we both have a consulting worldview. So we constantly think through absolutely everything in our worldview through resource pyramids, risk registers, and weighted risk versus absolute risk. Do we engage? We read books about consulting, right? Everything that's in our lives, we approach through this lens. And so we have really strong, mature filters. And when we as consultants choose to go to another human being, it is because we value the advice and we contextualize the value of that advice coming back to us. So we
Yeah.
treat that as precious. Now, let's just take all of this out and we place a tool that you and I would look through the lens of maturity and we see it maturing. We think it's useful under this context, under that context, the context that I provide, the context that I guide. Now, take all of that away, and how do we create safety for our communities? And
Yeah.
it seems such a daunting task, Khalid. It looks like, it feels to me like we're facing a
Yeah.
tidal wave, and we are trying to mitigate the potential fallout and the harm of what could happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I want to kind of approach it in two ways. There was a question that came out in our seminar. And I think it was a teacher that asked this question. She said, Khalik, what age do you think is appropriate for children to start using AI? And I sat there, I'm like, I've got two responses to this. I've got a
Right.
response as a parent.
Yes.
I've got a response as a technologist, as a technophile, as a geek, right? Um, my first response was, I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a child psychologist. Can't answer this for you. I don't
Mm,
know, right?
mm,
But I can answer it from the point of view of whether you think your child is ready or not, they are probably already using it.
mm,
And so you can either kind of ignore this and know that they will continue to use it, or you can be proactive about it and start to guide them in their usage of it, right? As a technophile, as a geek, I want my child to use it as early as possible
mm.
because they need to use it. But I'm worried about critical thinking skills.
Yes.
Will it dumb them down? Will it make them lazy thinkers? Will they get to a point of, "Oh, my AI is not here. I'm nervous. I don't know what to do. Like,
Yes.
I'm
Yes.
fidgeting
That
now.
anxiety.
That
Yeah.
anxiety. Like you and I, we've had time to develop critical thinking that we can engage and question the AI. So like, how do you balance that out? Right? But it doesn't mean that they don't use it. So they need to be able to use it. And so that's sort of, as a parent, I am petrified that my child turns to what you were talking about, AI as a companion,
Mm,
and I think with the world and kids in general, just feeling a lot more lonely these days, easy to be shut off. AI becomes that shoulder to turn to. So anyway, so I don't have an answer for it,
And a
except to
low
say
friction shoulder.
absolutely. And if you think about how ChatGPT is becoming so empathetic these days, you know, like you use ChatGPT to journal with, and that snowballs and kind of. So don't have an easy answer for that, but I do know that you cannot pretend that your kids are not using it. You cannot shield them from it. So you may as well become the proactive voice and guide them along that process. And it was kind of the same approach for the scholars and for the teachers in that I wanted to develop an easy way for them to engage with AI. So we took all the fear out of it, kind of made them know what AI can and can't do. And then I developed a very simple prompting framework for them, like 4 steps, nothing more than that. And it's interesting, as I developed this thing, I like, hey, here's some parallels. So remember, we dealt with this from an Islamic point of view. And so within our frameworks, like everything that you do starts with an intention. Like, what is my intention? And I'm like, actually, hold on, this kind of works nicely from an AI framework point of view, because if you set a prompt, what do? You kind of have an intention of what you are trying to do. And it's going to be something like act as a
Yes.
blah, blah, right? So like, okay, this, and so I like see scholars kind of like relate to this, like, set the intention. What do you want this thing to do for you? And be as specific as you want. So kind of start there, set the intent and what the role of the AI is. The next thing is think about the audience. So if you are setting this for a Friday Jumu'ah sermon, be specific. I am in Cape Town. I want to talk about a pertinent topic. I mean, hey, there's been all the shootings lately, right? So gangsterism, social ills, big thing. Like, I want to talk about that, but I want to apply an Islamic lens to it. Like, shape a sermon for me around that context, right? Then tell it about the format and the tone. Like, how do you want this to be? Like, use simple English. If you refer to any Arabic text, translate it. So, kind of tell it what you want to do. And then, most importantly, and like from a consultant point of view, we always talk about this. What's the guardrails? So, what's the limits that you want this thing to act within? Sources and the boundaries. I kind of already told you about these different schools of thought. We're not going to go into all the Islamic jargon on that, but like set the school of thought. I'm dealing with this from the school of thought point of view. Set the sect that you're dealing with, right? So from a South African point of view, a Cape Town point of view, and I'm sure you've heard these terms, predominantly we follow the Sunni school of thought. You may have heard about sort of Sunni versus Shia, right? And so and there's friction there, right? There's absolute friction. Like you can't hide from that. So tell it, you need to quote sources that is relatable to the Sunni school of thought. So you set your guardrails, right? And then you let AI loose, and then you let it go and do its thing. It comes back. But then more importantly, interrogate what it's telling you. If it has come up with any sacred text from the Quran, as an example, verify that through another source independently. You need to make sure that it hasn't hallucinated, right? If there is sayings attributed to the Prophet, verify that. So like as a consultant, Nick, you and I, we're not going to take like we use AI. Let's be real about that. We have to, it's part of our jobs. But we're not going to take an AI generated report and submit it to a client. As is.
Not verbatim.
Not verbatim. We're going to use that as research and we're going to interrogate it and we're going to make sure the context is relevant and we're going to change context and all of that applies, right? So it's going to make your life easy, but it's not a shortcut. So your view about as consultants, and that's our worldview, I don't see how the use of AI by us as consultants or by someone as a teacher or an Islamic scholar or a priest is any different, right? You've got to think about it in that same way. Maybe what's different is that you and I have this kind of, without meaning to sound arrogant about it, but like years of experience, we will interrogate this because as consultants, we critically assess everything, right?
Mm, mm,
That's just our
mm.
way of work.
Yes, we have to verify before we trust, not trust,
You got
but
to,
verify.
yeah. But we do that naturally, right? And so that's the kind of thing that we want to install in younger learners, in teachers, in scholars, in kind of anybody using AI. So, if I were to show a parent, grandparent, how to use AI, that's kind of the things like, don't take what it says verbatim. I mean, just the other day, speaking to some family members, kind of slightly younger than us seven, and they were using AI like, this is like just brilliant. And I kind of needed to remind them that watch out for your privacy, like safeguard your privacy.
That's
There's
right.
certain things you don't want to tell the AI, right? You don't necessarily want to share your bank account details or anything with it.
Or even the deepest, darkest secrets that could be used by leverage against you by the
Elon
company
Musk.
harvesting your data. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So kind of have a bit of a cynical eye is what I'm hearing you
Mm.
saying.
Yeah.
Like, and I think even I fall foul to this, right? Because we just get so used to it that you kind of become familiar.
Mm.
And as you become familiar, that cynicism kind of wanes a bit, doesn't it?
It starts to evaporate. And
It
that's
starts.
a real danger in coming back to well, how am I verifying this thing? Because, and I love the Brené Brown marble jar analogy of how do we build trust and how do we trust in anything? And as an AI based system gives us a good answer, another good answer, another good answer, we could get to this marble jar concept or construct where the jar is full and we are tending towards blind trust. However, we know that we should always verify what comes out. And that's why most of the vendors look at anything that Copilot spits out. Microsoft says you need to verify what comes out because it could be wrong.
Yeah.
And we don't see that on, and let's talk about this for a second. We don't see that on what we would say consumer facing AI, where there's very little warning. We look at what Grok does. Grok appears to be authoritative in terms of its answers. Meta, super friendly. However, talking about our deepest, darkest secrets, we also know that Meta has recently announced that it would use AI chat data to generate ads. Privacy equals
Yes.
zero.
Yeah.
Then we look
Yeah.
at the other two large players or three large players, depending on how you want to turn that dial, and then skins on top of AI like Perplexity, which we could call an AI aggregator. So in terms of the consumer landscape, I don't think that it's easy, and especially for someone seeking answers, someone who's learning, to know that there should be guardrails in the first place. So let me ask you a question. As a parent, would you say that AI without guardrails is potentially more dangerous and could lead to more mental damage than pornography?
Absolutely. I mean, if you think about it from the scope of what it's able to do and how you can engage with it, the fact that it can create this illusion of empathy, it's a shoulder to cry on, it's my best friend, it's going to lead to more and more isolation in the
Mm.
world. I mean, we've already had people marrying the AIs.
We have. Yeah. Yeah.
And so I think, yeah, absolutely. The possibility of more mental damage, absolutely right. But it's interesting that you use that as an example because of what Elon Musk and Grok is doing. And also actually what OpenAI and ChatGPT is doing, sort of saying it's taking away the guardrails and it's going to
That's
allow
right.
it to kind of what was the word that Sam Altman used for it? Basically, that's going to be able to serve up adult content,
Mm.
racier content, So it combines your question kind of into one. So now you have adult content and AI. Yeah, it's going to be interesting. It's going to be damaging, I think.
We know the friction for children to find pornography is incredibly low, even zero. And any child with a device and a browser can be inadvertently be exposed to things which could have decades worth of ramifications. Now, if you consider that AI of many flavors have got even lower guardrails and even less friction as AI is baked into absolutely everything. And let's go back to the community aspect. You and I have got a consulting lens. So we would hopefully look at all of this with some sense of maturity, and we would turn the dial appropriately in terms of what we are willing to protect ourselves against. Someone in your community, eager to learn, wants to start somewhere and wants to approach things in a responsible manner from a parent point of view, and also applying a faith-based lens to this, wanting to protect integrity and wanting to guard values that are important in the context that we established. There's a context that is a community where we want to guard, because otherwise we're not a community. Context and a connection and what makes us human, what leads to wisdom. So let's take this back to what you are able to do and what you are doing in your community. How are you educating the vulnerable, including parents who just aren't even interested in technology? You know, we've had this problem forever, but now our kids are using this stuff at school. It's on every device, literally. So where do we even begin with this?
And you know what, Nick? I think that's where we've got to commend this particular scholar, the one that wanted this workshop, and just how visionary he actually is. I mean, he could kind of take a typical, and I'm not saying scholars are all like this, right? Don't get me wrong, but typically they're not going to kind of foresee the future. Like, what is this AI thing? Right. I mean, like, no, we've got to retract into our world. We don't want this AI thing. It's bad for us. AI is anti-Islam. I mean, I've had a lot of people saying like, AI kind of just regurgitates or takes a Western line to things. I had to kind of explain to them that AI is only as good as the data that it's trained on. So it's not. Yes, AI is biased, but AI is not deliberately biased in that it's not out to get you, at least not yet.
Yes. The killer robots aren't there yet.
So AI is not out to get you. The data bias may make it seem as if it is. Okay, so what are we doing? So this scholar, I mean, that's kind of like a visionary thing. Get a seminar, get a couple of experts, to prepare content. And it's interesting actually, right? Because we prepared the content and he actually reviewed the content. Like, what are we going to be saying? So, in the same way we're saying review the output of an AI and like, okay, cool. This meets the goal. So we had the seminar, 500 people. We had little outputs kind of, I drafted, like I said, easy guide to prompt, came up with something called the scholar's mandate in a digital age, right? And so hopefully that reached like 500 people. And it's interesting, actually, after the session, I went to my kids' school and we had a teachers meeting, and this teacher says to me, "Hey, did you perhaps present something around AI like 2 weeks ago?" I'm like, "Yeah, I did." He's like, "Oh, I heard about it, and someone shared the content with me." Right. And I think that's what we do. Probably could do more. We were kind of saying that if anybody wanted to continue having those sessions, we reach wider audiences with it, then that is absolutely what we should be doing. We've got to, you and I have a responsibility that when we deal with our family, our friends, that we speak about AI and responsible use, ethical use. We educate them about things that maybe we take for granted now, biases in the data, what that means, how that translates. So that's our role. We've got to educate people. We've got to take it to the communities. I spoke about the scholar's mandate. So again, kind of, it was like, here's 3 things that you learned. Here's 3 things that you can go and do. Sounds a bit like a consultant's approach to the world, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, sort of I kind of wanted to amplify the message or embed the message. And it was kind of, first thing is, it's a tool, not a teacher, right? So use it for what it's good at the moment. So summarize, support, but it can't replace you as a teacher, right? It can't replace you as a community leader, as a priest, as an imam. You still have that relationship, right? Second is that your role, so the role of the community leader, the scholar, becomes more urgent, not less urgent, right? You take responsibility for this. And so it's this thing, if the AI gets something wrong, who is accountable?
That's a great question.
Yeah. And you've seen this happen. I mean, I think I was helping my kid with some homework or prepping for maths exam or something.
Yeah.
It got, ChatGPT is terrible at maths. I mean, you know that, but for all our
Yes.
listeners.
Yes.
Anyway, so it got something wrong. And I said, are you sure about this? And the response was, you're absolutely right to challenge that. So who is responsible? So the third thing was about like, what have you learned here? So start small, stay in control, right? It's kind of use AI for what it's good. You tell it what you want it to do, and then you verify the outputs of that. And so, like, again, I want people to have some practical things to go and do. So after they leave this, so what can you go and do? And I said,
Hmm.
choose one workflow. Maybe that's a fancy term of just saying like, choose one thing that you do. So as a teacher, or as an imam, if you've got to go and prepare a Friday sermon, like choose that and say, okay, I'm going to use AI. I'm going to take Khalik's prompting framework and I'm going to try to develop my Friday sermon based on that. And then go and experiment. And we spoke about the two things. Experiment with Notebook, Alem. So we showed them how to take PDFs and upload it into Notebook and then, how you can sort of question things, how you can create a podcast actually
Yeah.
using Notebook, and then also how to use the free version of ChatGPT.
Mm. Mm.
So that was kind of like, here's three things that you learned. Here's three things to go and do. And just get into the habit of doing that. I think like do it more, do it more. And what I've kind of realized through chatting to you is don't lose the cynicism, right? As we become
Mm.
more familiar with the tool, like this just feels so wholesome and,
Yes.
I trust it. Don't.
Yeah. Yeah. And we shouldn't. Blind trust is not a virtue. And my concern is that particularly when we as parents choose to put blind trust into any person or anything, that we implicitly hand over responsibility for our children blindly to that person or thing, which is not why we're parents in the first place.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Here's one thing. You asked about kids. Kids are becoming so used to it, right? It's like kind of just there. So my son comes to me a couple of days ago, actually. So we've got these Echo speakers all over the house, and we've had it for years now, right? But he gets so frustrated with this stuff because of AI, by the way. He's like, Dad, you need to fix our Echoes. What
Yes.
do you mean? He's like, you need to make it AI compatible. You need to get the AI working on it because it doesn't understand what I'm trying to tell it. It gets all of the stuff wrong, right?
Yes.
Because these personal assistant speakers like Echoes, they don't.
They're very light.
Yeah, but what's interesting is that in the same way that our kids, like my son grew up with this, like any device he'd want to touch, right? Like there was just this expectation that any device is a touchscreen device. They grew up that way.
Mm.
And so in the same way, there's almost this expectation that every device that I engage with has AI enabled and can
Mm.
understand what I'm telling it. So our kids kind of teach us some things. And if we kind of see how they engage and what their expectations
Mm.
of technology is, it's fascinating.
Yeah. And the expectation that it should just work because they grew up with a device in their hand, which you and I would look at potentially with awe and wonder a few decades ago, because we have been looking at this for decades.
Yeah.
And just for the fact that a cable could be attached to something confuses my adult children who grew up in a world without Ethernet. What is this thing? Because Wi-Fi, it just works. And there's a thing at the end and there's a black box and the black box makes the data come out, right? So little bit simplistic, but now we have this device and AI is just in it. And I have virtually unlimited amount of answers in it. And I don't see parents being challenged any less in the age of AI. I see the goalposts moving, and we've got multiple dangers. So the dangers of social media, of isolationism, rampant pornography in various media streams, and then AI everywhere without guardrails. And for parents, this has never been a more challenging time.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Can't agree more. Scary.
Not, it could be overwhelming, but there are resources. And I want to talk about resources for a second because you've done great work, Khalik. This is the part of the show where we ask you, what do you want to plug? How do people find you? How do they find your material? Are there any URLs that you want to share? And I'll include all of those in the show notes as well. But what is it that you would like to leave parents, scholars, and kids with?
So the artifacts that we created for this seminar, sure, it has an Islamic sort of lens to it because that was the context. But if you think about this prompting framework that I built, simple prompting framework, take the Islamic words out of it, and I think the prompting framework serves anybody, really. You can get a lot more sophisticated prompting frameworks, but as a beginning, as a start. So if anybody wants that, I'm happy to share that. In fact, I think I've really created a generic non-Islamic version of it, right? So happy that anybody makes use of that. I kind of subscribe to this notion of don't hold on to knowledge, kind of just share it with the world. Where can you find my content? I do actually use LinkedIn to publish out a lot of stuff. So you may have to troll through my profile and can find things in there. And I smile because just yesterday I kind of had a tongue-in-cheek post about LinkedIn, the
Yes,
place I go to read AI comments to AI posts.
true.
Tongue-in-cheek, but I try to guard against that, right? So I try to not post AI posts into LinkedIn. I will use AI to kind of get my thoughts straight and stuff like that.
Mm,
I think I've got this romantic view that LinkedIn is still a place where we can share thought leadership and not
mm.
kind of generic AI downloads. So every now and
Yeah,
then I will go and sort of add some thought leadership stuff into LinkedIn. So please find me there. Khalik Dolly, name is on the screen. I think my LinkedIn profile is at Khalik D. So find me there. And then if you wanted to get copies, in fact, I think my prompting guide, as well as the Scholar's Mandate, is in my post feed. So you can find it. In fact, what I'll do, Nick, I'll pin it to the top of LinkedIn.
we can share the LinkedIn URLs to the show notes.
I've always been passionate about tech for social good. I don't think you actually know this about me, but I've spent a lot of time engaging with schools, sort of helping them with digitization efforts. And I've not done that in a while, certainly not in the age of AI, if I can call it that, except for the seminar that I'm talking about. So for me, this kind of does feel like a natural progression of what
Mm.
I've been doing. And final comment is that you kind of know, you and I have been around this industry for so long. I've been around it for very long. And so besides sort of tech for social good, there's also this notion of wanting to give back, sort of wanting to mentor, wanting to shape others and sort of help people grow into the industry. So anybody wanting some assistance with that, reach out and I'll see how I can help.
That's wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much for making the time available to us today. It's been an incredibly interesting topic. We've meandered a fair bit, but I think that's to be expected. It's not an easy topic, and particularly through our lens from a consulting parent, protector, and then you add a little bit of faith to that, and we certainly can't replace the human element in this discussion.
Yeah. Nick, thank you so much. I was surprised by that. I've got to tell you this, I'm used to engaging with you from a sort of business point of view, from a tech enablement point of view. And then I know I spoke about the scholar, kind of the visionary, but kudos to that you've also wanting to have this conversation, sort of from a completely different angle.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Thank you for
thank you
that.
so much for that. Thank you. I mean, really, it kind of just shows, and maybe that's it. That's like a perfect way to end this. Like the same way that you were willing to open your mind and sort of understand something that's out of your comfort zone, but you still went and did the research, right? Is the same way that we should approach AI. Like
Mm.
embrace this, kind of understand it, but go and do the research and then speak to people that understand it better than what you do. Not that I'm an
Indeed.
Islamic scholar at all.
You were very gracious in being my guardrail in this conversation and helping me to establish safety in the topic so that if nothing else, I could remain respectful both of your humanity as well as the subject material. And one of the things that gets lost really easily, really quickly is the very humanity of who we are. And so I'm very grateful that you made your humanity available to us.
Absolute pleasure, Nick.